So I want to start off by thanking Samir, for this opportunity, and also congratulating Samir and the entire 3AI team for how far they have come along, and really looking forward to the proceedings today. So I want to start off with a story. In 1995, I had a chance dinner meeting with Bon Moku. He was the legendary chairman of LG Group. Many of us think of LG as electronics, but the first slide in LG's presentation was A to Z of LG's business, and every alphabet had an industry or a business associated with LG: banks, metals, chemicals, oil, energy. So electronics is just about 12% of LG's business. And in this dinner meeting, we spoke about the DNA problem that LG had. And the DNA issue was more in terms of LG and in some ways Korea being a software nation company and, hardware nation and company. And as we were getting into the convergence era, the challenge was, how do you, think about a washing machine and a microwave and a refrigerator having more software than hardware. And this wasn't intuitive to LG, and ultimately, at the end of the dinner meeting, we had the architecture of the, first GCC. One of the initial, concepts, that I took forward from my school education was this whole notion of escape velocity. So, very simple terms, escape velocity is the velocity that you need to, escape the gravitational forces. So anything that goes up to space, must have adequate escape velocity. So ultimately, you can, orbit as appropriate. And, when I initially started engaging with LG as the advisor to Bon Moku, I realized that the organizational change management was like the gravitational forces. There was nothing that could, help LG in terms of escape, the humongous change that was required to essentially set up a capability that will lead to the transformation of LG to what it is as an organization today. So the analogy of escape velocity to the change management that organizations need to undertake to make their global teams and capabilities successful. Rest is history. LG had a very successful entry, and today LG's GCC is a thriving business capability, one that has eventually led to the transformation of LG. For me, there were two learnings that came out of LG. The first one had to do with the magic that contextually empowered talent and leaders can do for their organization. It was nothing short of magic, building that escape velocity, doing the organizational change management, and a company that was so dependent upon everything done in Korea and wasn't just ready for an external part of the organization that will ultimately do what LG was aspiring to do. The second part was what this global capability could do to then an $80 billion corporation. It completely changed LG as an organization. So today we are in some ways at a tipping point. I always talk about the fact that when you look at the GCC industry, this is the end of the beginning. The fun is starting now. We are at a point of inflection. The real maturity is ahead, will keep evolving in some ways. I did my first GCC in 1995. We are working on 160th GCC today. So think about 30 years almost 6 GCCs a year since we, did LG as the, first company. All of us, always look for change, and monotony sets in, as we do the job. And I've been at it for 30 years, and hopefully another 30 years, continue with this quest of, evolving and maturing and, sort of innovating around this entire model. I always talk about the fact that it's almost like working for 160 different companies. Every organization is different. Every context is new. There are new beginnings. There's never any monotony. And that's, I guess, what makes the GCC industry, stand apart. So GCCs are now poised to define what the next generation of global leadership, innovation, and resilience would be. Not too long ago, GCCs were seen as the place where work was sent. Today, GCCs are where work is led out of. GCCs have converted backstage to main stage, cost centers to brain centers. And this transformation is nothing short of revolutionary. And the good part is it's still unfolding. By 2030, we believe 70% of the Fortune 500 companies will rely on their GCCs to drive their core business outcomes, not just efficiency and productivity and the expense savings that come with the GCC model, but also innovation, customer experience, and driving their growth agenda. This is not a forecast. This is, truly a reality in motion. So today, I'm going to talk about what's next for GCCs and how it'll shape the future, before the future shapes us. The real question is not what GCCs will become. It's who they will empower, what they will disrupt, and how they will lead. The forever era of GCC is here, and it's anything but business as usual. So let me just start off with a quick introduction of ANSR. So we have been doing GCCs since 2005, 160 GCCs, 150 direct employees. We also look at ANSR as one of the largest managed service providers from an infrastructure perspective, 12 million square feet of space, $2 billion, largely held by Axel partners, Accenture, and ServiceNow. There's a reason why we have three, very interesting, investors. With Accenture, we're building what the future of, hybrid GCCs would be all about. With ServiceNow, we are building the GCC super app, so companies can build anywhere, anything. And of course, Axel, that really got us started, helped us in terms of our pivot into like a pseudo SaaS kind of a model. And besides India, of course, we are in Poland, in Abu Dhabi. We're setting up operations in Guadalajara, in Mexico City, in Monterrey, in Bogota, in Manila. So, truly a global play. I'm going to talk today about 10 trends, the new GCC Playbook, 10 trends that are likely to disrupt the future of the GCCs. So I want to start off with this whole notion of operating models. Ultimately, how would GCC be established? How would they operate? And we see essentially 5 different archetypes of operating models. From an AI and innovation hub to second headquarters to a hybrid GCC that will leverage different kinds of operating model. So the companies that are going to be coming in and the incumbents that we have today will eventually fit into one of the 5 archetypes. The second thing I want to talk about is around this whole notion of organizational alignment. Because ultimately GCCs are extension to an organization, and eventually they will become the manifestation of the work organizations are doing around workforce transformation, typically using a 4-work framework, which essentially means what is the work, who is the workforce, what is the workplace, and what is the ways of working. So we would see, tremendous sort of progress in terms of how the organizational alignment would be accelerated as organizations undertake, progressive and bold interventions around workforce transformation. The third notion is one of leadership. The future of GCCs is going to be not just about the talent that we can bring to global enterprises, but also how we can lead the efforts in terms of the global teams that are a manifestation of the GCCs. So if you look at what's happening in the market today, a GCC experience is now becoming critical for global executives to be ready in critical jobs like a CIO or a CHRO. And effectively, we will see GCCs becoming crucibles of leadership talent. So effectively, you don't need to have leaders move to work, but work and companies will move to leaders right here in our backyard. The next notion is one of this big paradigm shift, which is around GCCs moving away from being service delivery centers to more of talent leadership and outcomes. So essentially what is important is the work or the business outcomes that GCCs are influencing as a consequence of the talent and the leadership they bring on board, and not as much about the service delivery and the SLAs and KPIs that we are so used to today. One of the big predictions we have is ultimately how GCCs will decouple from the broader industry. We're predicting that ultimately GCCs will become the mainstream enterprise. It'll be no different from the home locations where you have large companies or global companies that work in tandem with different types of service providers, different constituents of the local ecosystem, and they have sort of effectively decoupled. So the IT industry, ITES industry as we see today will largely be comprised of consulting companies, service providers, that will support, the new enterprises that will operate in global locations. We're already seeing this decoupling happen, with the top 5 or 10% of the GCC. So it'll become a lot more mainstream as we go along. GCCs are poised to become innovation powerhouses. We talk a lot about innovation, but we're looking at essentially companies building sandbox environments and using GCCs to experiment with some of the emerging exponential technologies like AI, quantum computing, and everything that's going to be next-gen tech. So one constant change is going to be the fact that technology will continuously change, and GCCs will become hotbed for such experimentation. Two messages over here in terms of the emergence of the emerging locations. We are, at some point, tier 1 locations will get saturated, and we will see GCCs, coexisting with talent and regulatory advantages that tier 2 or emerging locations are going to be providing. There's a huge national effort, as some of us would have heard from our finance minister talking about building a national collaborative framework for emerging locations, and a number of tier 2 locations are going to be benefiting from it. The other one is, of course, the emergence of, multi-center or a hub and spoke models, companies using tier one for larger GCCs, and of course tier two more for talent and the regulatory benefits. Clean, purposeful GCCs. I guess some notion of ESG is going to come to GCCs. We see a lot of pollution, a lot of noise into what is a relatively simple concept of an organization just setting up another office, providing consistent brand experience, leveraging consistent enterprise practices. So we're seeing more and more of clean, highly integrated, tightly coupled, parts of the organizations with a very clear mandate and business expectations. We hear a lot about, this notion of seat on the table, GCCs, becoming profit centers or doing more than what they are mandated to. So we believe that GCCs will eventually become a lot more purposeful. You stand for what is expected out of you. You're clean. You're the company in its purest and cleanest form. Of course, this is something that all of us have been talking about. We believe the notion of a GCC in some ways is very divisive. Do you need a term? Do we need a different term? Is GCC truly representative as a term for the power of this model? And in fact, an interesting aspect is if you talk to companies that are successfully running their GCCs, they don't use internally the term GCCs. So if McDonald's comes to India, they're McDonald's in India. If Target comes to India, they Target in India, and so on, right? So nobody uses this term GCC, and we feel it's time to change. There is obviously a lot of work to be done by all of us in terms of, what the next phrase is going to be. From my personal experience, we've rarely used the concept of a GCC. It's a put-off, for global leaders, who expect their global teams to be the same. So you don't want to be projecting as a part of the organization that is any different. And finally, AI becoming the ultimate GCC disruptor. We know that, AI, is going to disrupt our entire world in some form or the other. There's been a lot of talk about how AI is going to disrupt the services industry with a lot of transactional jobs, that will eventually get automated. A lot of jobs will disappear. But we're doing some, real work in terms of, how AI is going to change the word of GCCs. In our portfolio, we have about 3,500 AI engineers doing some defining work, and I'm going to talk about, or maybe have you guys take a sneak peek at the AI crystal ball. I'm talking circa 2030, so what's coming. Even though parts of AI is a solution in search of a problem, but we are quickly uncovering some of the problems that will help AI realize its full potential. Again, 10 predictions from, where's AI headed, in conjunction with the GCCs. So the whole concept of AI native GCCs, and we're talking about a different, different kinds of job families emerging in the process. Think about AI trainers, prompt engineers, model governance leads. These are, concepts that are not very commonly used. We have companies in our portfolio that have already started building teams that will, essentially train the AI around it. This concept of work segmentation is very interesting. So essentially, think about GCC comprising of two kinds of talent. There'll be human talent, and there will be digital talent. The impact of AI on GCCs is going to be relatively subdued compared to the services industry. Much of it is because of the kind of work that is undertaken at GCCs, whether it's planning, strategy, trust or relationship building, creative work that obviously requires human talent. So we'll see very clear segmentation of the work as we move forward. Uh, the concept of one-person GCCs, we are experimenting with this whole notion of undertaking execution of chunks of material work that can be undertaken by one human in conjunction with a number of contextually empowered and culturally compatible AI agents. So very sci-fi kind of a concept, but think about a human master working with AI agents, and the additional dimension of cultural context and the business context becomes very important. So we're experimenting with how do you bring the organizational culture, which really helps different GCCs stand out in the market, and how the specific business context can be transplanted into the digital talent. GCCs are now becoming global AI implementation hubs. So in our GCCs, we are seeing three types of AI activities. We have AI or agentic bolt-ons, digital talent that is undertaking commoditized transactional work, no or very minimal human intervention. We have SWAT teams that are essentially going around the organization looking for material use cases across the organization. And then we have the AI horsepower teams that are eventually building enterprise-grade AI applications. So it's interesting how ultimately GCCs in the future will manifest themselves in a very different way. We're also looking at GCCs investing about $15 billion, by 2030 to, build enterprise-grade applications. AI will also bring in a very significant, productivity and performance management revolution. We see the demise of the standard KPIs and SLAs, and the performance measurement will be more driven by the impact of AI and the enterprise-wide outcomes, whether it's the impact on headcount, overall productivity, growth, agenda, transformation. So the way you are going to measure productivity and performance in a GCC is going to completely change with AI taking the front seat. Workforce transformation, we all sort of know about it, but as per our research, 40% of the current GCC talent will require upskilling with appropriate AI tools. So this will obviously be a big priority for the organization, and we are working on different kinds of developmental interventions that GCCs need to bring in to essentially be future ready. Hybrid intelligence operating models in terms of how do you make AI and human talent effectively collaborate more seamlessly? What are the handoff points? And eventually, how does even work and the outcomes flow from humans to AI agent? So again, one of the sci-fi kind of dimensions in terms of where GCCs are ultimately going, but this is an interesting trend to sort of watch out for. There's a lot of work being done in terms of building domain-specific AI solutions, as we see a lot more contextualness that will eventually challenge the success of the GCC. So AI will come to the rescue in terms of models that will help GCCs essentially come up to speed in terms of the domain nuances of undertaking the work effectively. We all sort of talk about the concept of responsible AI, which is also becoming, more mainstream. And we are seeing GCCs take the lead across the organization in terms of building centers of excellence around governance structure. Will have issues pertaining to integrity, ethics, bias mitigation, transparency. And of course, the big challenge is going to be as we see global AI regulations emerge, more specifically in the US and across the EU. Ultimately, how do GCCs comply with the AI regulations? And finally, the role that GCCs will play in cybersecurity and digital trust. And we see because of availability of talent in locations like India and paucity of such talent in the home markets, GCCs will ultimately lead security operations, areas like AI-based threat intelligence and building zero trust architecture deployments across the organization. So there's some very interesting work that is underway. And of course, we'll talk more about it, as we go along. Thank you so much.